What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Team Kitchen Fable video. Jacob here, and I'm joined by my friend John. He's a local player in South Florida. If you guys are viewing from the Card Fight Vanguard community, you probably know him well for creating the deck Highlander in that card game. But he's recently jumped over to Flesh and Blood, and he's doing great. And yeah, he recently placed really high at the Pro Tour with this Starvo deck that he actually built himself, and he's nice enough to agree to come on the channel and go through it with us. So let's hop in. All right, guys. I'm joined by Jonathan Owens, and I've got his Starvo list laid out in front of us in TTS. And we're just going to walk through some of the interesting choices he made that allowed him to take this deck really far through the Pro Tour standings and end with a really great result. What was your result that you ended with, John?
We finished 23rd. We went 10-4, finished 6-1 day one, and day two we did hit a bit of a slump and ended up going 4-3.
Okay, but yeah, that's a super great result still. Like top 32 Pro Tour representation from like all over the world, including people from New Zealand. I think you said you played a bunch of different countries actually.
If
Um,
yeah, I believe it was like 8 or 9 different countries if I go back and count. Pretty crazy.
yeah, yeah, that's super cool. So I think you had a great list. I know you were playing Starvo for a while. Both you and I played Showstopper before Starvo came out, and that's kind of how we met, was playing the Showstopper mirror. So pretty awesome to kind of just evolve further into another Guardian hero and get a really creative deck list going.
Yeah, for sure, for
Um,
sure.
So yeah, I'm gonna just hop into the list here, and we can start with the equipment choices. Obviously, I'm pretty sure everyone knows by now what Bravo Star of the show does. And then we have the basics: Crown of Seeds and Tunic. Everyone's figured that out by now, and Crater Fist and Winter's Wail. And then we have three boot pieces: Ironhide Legs, Null Rune Boots, and Time Skippers. What are the reasonings for those separate ones? Obviously, Null Rune Boots comes in for Arcane Barrier, but
Right,
running
so the
Ironhide Legs into
Ironhide is
everything
just
else.
there, yeah, for the aggro decks. And then Time Skippers, also the mirror for the Ironhide. Time Skippers just have a prism. Sometimes you have a hand where 4 card hand with time skippers, you play a lot of blues, so you can pop double auras. They can also just ALS you, so it can help you push damage and get around certain plays.
Yeah, are you ever using Time Skippers aggressively to just do two attacks in a row, or do you kind of save them just for the aura insurance?
If it goes late in the game, I actually did have a game. I believe it was one of the matches I won into Prism, where I did use it aggressively because I had Prism at like 4 life and I had a 4 card hand where I could have thrown out a red lightning surge from hand and then also hit with a hammer. So it really helped, secure tempo to keep tempo going until you find basically the final fuse to clear out the game.
Nice. Yes, I think that's a really great equipment piece for the Prism matchup. So I think as far as arms goes, Crater Fist is everything. But I don't know if I saw any Starvo lists besides yours on Shock Charmers. I'm not sure about you, but what does this come in for, and what's its use?
So you have the use of chain. Unfortunately, I only played into one chain, and this did make a huge difference. It was actually round one. I was able to mulligan. The reason you use shock charmers is to fix your hand when you go second. So chain ended up going first. I sided this in, and you can use that spell void to actually break spellbound creepers, which is a really huge extender in chain. So I plan to race chain, which means that I need to have a consistent fuse. And if I'm not consistently fusing, then I'm probably not winning the game. On top of that, the pay two to deal a damage is actually relevant, especially when you get certain heroes lower on life. Even with the dominated attacks, you can turn a evergreen. You can pitch 2 blues and hit for 3 more damage, and that can actually just break through a lot of defenses and make them guard even. If you throw a 3 for 7 out if they're low on life, they have to guard differently because now they're going to be like, oh, if he shock charms me, I die. So it's really interesting. Spell Void is also really good for Kano. I saw all the Starvos get kind of killed on stream. I didn't get to play any Kano either, unfortunately, but having that spell void too for the wildfire turn just gives you so much like leverage to survive, which is just really huge.
Yeah, I mean, Crown of Seeds is already like artificial arcane barrier, and you run the no rune boots. So if you can stop 4 of the Aether Wildfire damage through pitching and shock charmers, that's gonna nerf them by a lot. So considering how many Kanos were floating around at the top tables, I think it's super heads up to have shock charmers around.
Yeah, we didn't play
Um,
Rampart either.
mhm.
We just chose to play Stalagmite. We ended up taking out um, the Rampart for the shock tremors. But looking back, I think I would actually take out one lead the charge, and put the Rampart back in. A
Mm,
lot of people were on Rampart in the mirror, which is I had exposed for it, but some of the games I really wasn't seeing it until way later. So it almost felt like Rampart did have some use, but overall, I don't think it made too much of a difference because Stalagmite was still really relevant. It's still great to force your opponent to use tunic counter strategically and
yeah,
not have free reign to do whatever they want basically, and just get 5 card hands basically. So most of the mirrors, my opponents never had 5 card hands due to Stalagmite. Um,
gotcha.
yeah, I think it's useful. Prism too, like most of the matchups you're gonna be facing, Stalagmite still stays in. Chain and Prism. Even the mirror, you could argue. I don't think one is strictly correct or incorrect. You have more block with Stalagmite on the first use, so it can help you through dominate attacks as well.
Yeah, so your theory with Rampart versus Stalagmite in the mirror is if your opponent is on exposed, they just straight up destroy all use of Rampart. But if they expose a Stalag, you can even if you block with it once and they expose it and it goes to 0 block, you can still block it one more time to give them a frostbite. So it kind of ruins the value of expose, or not ruins, but it nerfs the value if the opponent is heavy on exposes.
Yeah, for sure. Playing the exposed myself, there were 2 games where I was able to get it off on the Rampart players. Majority were playing Rampart, so it was super helpful. I actually got someone on turn 0, which basically just secured the game. That's really huge. I just think running Rampart's too big of a risk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, expose is super strong. If you see it that early, that's definitely going to secure a lot of value throughout the course of the game of the opponent not having access to Rampart.
Right. I think it is high risk, high reward. If you play Rampart and your opponent's not unexposed or they don't expect it, then it's very high value. Um, but then when you do get exposed, you just ask yourself why you didn't play Stalagmite. So
Yeah,
it's like my opponent that I did that to was just like, bro, like
yeah. He's looking at your stalagmite like, darn.
it was like turn 0. He's like, can I change shields? I sided the wrong one in.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely a really good aspect to keep it to pay attention to in the mirror. So I think the next non-elemental one we have is lead the charge, and you probably just bring this in for Prism, I assume, for killing extra
It's just there
auras.
for Prism. Yeah, it actually wasn't as helpful as I thought it was. Well, I guess I was playing a more control-oriented list, so I think
Hmm.
it's more relevant in those lists. But I think going forward, you may cut to 1 or 2 copies, just because
Mm.
you want to keep your fuse rate really, really high. Um, and diluting the fuse rate is sometimes not great, especially when you need to close out games.
Yeah, you think you would maybe bring in like a couple extra shock strikers or one of the just other blue elemental attacks?
Yeah, I might add like a third red lightning surge because those were
Oh
great.
yeah.
Those were really helpful. Um, 2 is a good
Okay.
number. I don't want you don't like seeing them constantly, but at the same time, if you can plant them in Arsenal and then you draw the fuse, like you're just putting up easily 17, 17 damage off of a red earth card.
Yeah, that's huge for sure. I mean, even just pressuring spectral shields and hammering an aura afterwards if you didn't draw the fuse is still very relevant going into Prism. So the red lightning surge is, I think, definitely a great addition to the list. Yeah, so we got those 2 blue non-elementals. A lot of the blue elemental stuff I think is standard across a lot of lists. Some lists run one or two blizzards. You're running all three here. Is that something that you really value into chain and certain other matchups?
Yeah, so I think it was actually relevant to the entire field because
Hmm.
with Starvo, I think I dropped it on my stream game, and it was actually super relevant. A bunch of other games as well, I had to drop it in because it tells your opponent to make a difficult decision,
Yeah.
especially when the Starvo's sitting there with a two-card hand after fusing, and they're going to get a hammer and an arsenal. It not only tells them, hey, you're going to stop attacking me, it tells you you're going to have to pay the two and then use that last resource as well to hammer. So it's going to be either one or the other.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they're going to just say, that's fine. And it's basically a four block D react if you think about it. So, and then you played it three to see it into chain. So it was helpful for sure. If you need to get rid of it, you just pitch it in crown.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the mindset. I just felt like it was a good addition that could also come up if I played into Briar for sure. Definitely Briar and other aggro decks that can't really afford to pay resources. So I'd like to have it at three so I see it more frequently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another key aspect, like you were saying, with making your opponent make the hard decision is since Blizzard is a instant instead of reaction, you actually can just cast this in response to them declaring the attack and then wait to see what they do, and then you can declare your blocks. So like based on if they
Yes.
pay for it or
hmm
not, you have more information than them by the time you're making decisions. So that's huge with regards to playing Blizzard. Channel Lakes, obviously, I think these should be in every Starvo deck. These other ones like Icy Encounter and Winter's Grasp, really great aura killers and just elementals. Um, and then we have two Frost Fangs, and then we have three Winter's Bite. I think a lot of people figured out Winter's Bite. You're playing this pretty often, right? It's not just a pitch card.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't like that card into anything that's not chain because
Mm,
in Starvo they just pay it, they just laugh at you in Crown, and then in Prism they just laugh at you and then pitch a blue and then like throw in like they always have like the Soul Shield when you
that's
have the
true.
Winter's Bite, or they pitch a blue and make a Spectral Shield. So it's like,
Yeah, that's actually very true.
yeah, it felt really bad. Like there were so many times where I was drawing the Winter's Bite. I had maybe like a two card hand and it was like, oh, like I
Mm,
don't want to play this. But it's an ice card, you know? I mean, there's
yeah,
no better alternative, I would say, currently,
yeah.
until next set when we get the Bleak Expanse channel and, other shenanigans.
Sadly, I think Starvo will not be played by the time those cards come
Oh,
out.
that's right. Forgot about I'm thinking about the Living Legend format already.
Oh yeah,
I
dude.
actually have fun playing I have fun playing this deck.
You're so far in the future, bro. I'm not ready for the Living Legend
I'm like 2
format.
years ahead of you.
That's gonna
Yeah.
be insane, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have also Breakground and Evergreen. Obviously, one of these was already played. One of them's pretty much just a replacement for Autumn's Touch. Rest in peace. And then Pulse of Ice and Loft is an
Yeah.
auto
Rip the
include.
homie.
Yeah. Um, and then I guess the last decisions are like shock strikers and flashes. Did you ever feel like you wanted a few more lightning attacks for aura clearing, or did the ability on flash come up, or do you think it's kind of inconsequential?
I think Flash was just good because I'm playing so many attacks, like the chances of me having one are high, and then it also allows you to like flash throughout like a raw 7 damage attack, and then hammer in situations where you have to push damage,
Mm,
like maybe into chain where they're super low, where you put them in like a position to where they have to give you 3 out of 4 cards in their hand, or 4 cards, or Prism has to block it, or they have, say, a bunch of Spectral Shields made, which happens occasionally through cards like Prismatic Shield. And if you can't punch through that board state within like 1 to 3 turns, you're kind of doomed unless you see some crazy fuse turn and they don't have the D
mm,
react.
yeah,
So
yeah, that
it
makes a lot of
felt like,
sense.
yeah, it just felt like it was needed to keep up the pressure. And with Chain, like I gave up on fatiguing the deck. Um, it just seemed if you were basically building the deck to fatigue Chain, you were kind of just losing to everything else.
Yeah.
and you're still able to pretty much easily win. At least in my testing into chain, as long as you
Hmm.
have the shock strikers in there, shock charmers in there, and even cards like Crush Confidence.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know how many other people did this, but I know when the bans came out, you and Hasiel both said you went and watched some of the previous Starvo chain matches, like with Michael Hamilton, and counted how many times he blocked with Autumn's Touch. And if it was a two block, I think you say he pretty much dies every time, right?
Yeah, I mean, watching most of the games, I believe he was at like 3 and 4 life, and
Mm,
that's just a little bit too nerve-wracking to me.
yeah,
I feel like it's cutting it too close to the wire. If it was 8 or 9, I think I'd be a little bit more comfier with fatiguing the deck.
yeah,
But if you're going into the Pro Tour, you're also playing people that you're not playing people that don't understand fatigue. You're playing chain players that are prepared to play into fatigue. So I didn't think it was really a valid strategy for the most part, at least for Starvo. Some other decks can do it, but
yeah.
currently it just felt better to focus on fusing, and you'll have a better time into the rest of the meta as well.
Yep. Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. So I think with the older, like control oriented or casino, we didn't see as many yellows. Did you find that these yellow breakgrounds and evergreens were kind of just necessary to make up the absence of Autumn's Touch, but not lose too many resources in the deck?
Yeah, you had to play them. I absolutely hate like yellow cards in Starvo. Like
Yeah.
they're just so dead half the time. But I actually had an opponent play library on me in like round three, like
No
turn
way.
three. And I was sitting there like, oh man. And it was actually the turn after where I drew like, what was my hand? It was like blink, blink, yellow evergreen, yellow evergreen. So,
Jeez, you
so
really got him, bro.
I literally like I underpitched the yellow evergreen and then pitched a blink and swung with hammer. No,
Nice.
no, did I just play one out? No, I just played one out. Yeah, I just played no, I played one out, and then the following turn I got more yellows and blues and I had to pitch stack them. But then the turn after library comes out and like all my yellows are just sitting there on the bottom of the deck.
Oh man.
And it was like, oh man, just facing a library.
Dang. When
Yeah.
you were first saying it, I misheard you. I thought you said you were able to kill the library immediately, so my excitement is unwarranted. Actually, rest in
No.
peace. For
Yeah, it was I just gave up and went face.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you're not gonna fight a prism with a 5 card hand. It's like triple aura.
That's actually insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the reds are straightforward as well. Evergreens and breakgrounds just to make up for the loss of Autumn's Touch. Already talked about the Lightning Surge and then Pulse of Volthaven, definitely an auto include. Actually, on Pulse of Volthaven, I know sometimes like the control oriented lists take that out just because it's an instant. Are you pretty much keeping it in all the time though? That's kind of a debated topic.
Yeah, I mean, that card has bailed me out so many times. So it's like
Yeah,
sometimes it feels terrible to see it. I feel like there's no in between. It's either like, oh my gosh, I won the game because I drew this card, or it's like, ugh. But I think it's good to just keep in because if you can fuse, you can
yeah,
fuse. It fulfills 2 conditions. It helps your odds of fusing. So I think you should always keep it in pretty much. If not, you just icy hammer for 8, or you Oakenold. Obviously, you have to draw them in the same order, but it's like it happens occasionally.
yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And then we've got Sink Below at 2, Staunch Response Red at 3, and Turn Timber at 2. Um, I assume you're bringing these in for the mirror. Do you ever bring any D reacts in for any other matchups?
I keep the sinks in for chain.
Mm,
Everything else, I only bring in the D-Reacts for the mirror. And for Prism, I take out the D-Reacts entirely.
yeah.
So that was the spinals are actually sideboarded for me. I don't bring spinals in unless it's into chain or Prism.
Okay.
So yeah, that was kind of the thought process with the deck. The sinks are really helpful, especially in the mirror. Turntimbers and staunches are good. Sometimes they're almost counterproductive, as crazy as that
Mm,
sounds. But you just have to have them there because they're a safety net.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can maintain tempo and just hold one in the arsenal, and it really helps because your opponent has to make the decision of, do I eat this like, fused evergreen for 9, eat the icy hammer just to try and regain tempo? And then when you set up a successful defensive turn, the life gap is just very, very wide. And then you can essentially make more calculated risks to put them at a point where they can't fuse because they're going to have to be blocking and blocking and blocking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they're worth playing. Like, you have to play them in the mirror. I played someone that didn't play D reacts like in the mirror. They played like I think just the sinks. And the second I saw like any form of hand control, it was just like down the tube. To
Yeah.
where I was able to like kind of mitigate with like staunches and crowns, and different, defensive mechanics to get around it.
Yeah, for sure. So you said you'd bring in Spinal only for a couple matchups. Crippling is at 1. It's a little bit awkward to cast just for a 7 cost. I don't know why we
Yeah,
would even talk about Oakenold. I think that's an auto include.
it is an auto
Yeah.
include. Yeah, the crippling, I had it one. I mean, looking, if I was going on a pro quest, I think I would actually put Crush Confidence at 2, do a 2-2 split. And
Okay.
Crush Confidence is so good, but I was just getting smashed by crippling crushes fused every 5 seconds in the mirror. Even though they were awkward to cast, but they do secure a lot of tempo.
Yeah.
So I do think like they are awkward to cast, but if you draw it, you draw it, and sometimes it's almost like an auto win if your opponent can't deal with it.
Yeah, so I love that you found Crush Confidence for this list. I don't think Red Crush Confidence has ever been run in like Oldhim or Bravo Showstopper, but did you just feel like this meta was the perfect place for that hero ability or that crush ability?
Yeah, so I really liked that card. A lot of people told me they didn't like it, but in my testing, it was really good because it does basically everything into every matchup except for like dash. In the mirror, you can either essentially draw it with a fuse, or you can pitch stack it. So
Mm.
a lot of Starvo is second cycle, right?
Yeah.
Where yeah, you're trading blows, but you're trying to compress your deck to raw 4 card hand fuses. And when you see this and pop off on your opponent, because your opponent's not pitch stacking D reacts with the perfect fuse hand. They're trying to get an
Hmm.
Oaken turn, they're trying to get crippling, they're trying to get, big evergreen swings. You're basically setting that up, and then you can just swing tempo entirely because they're drawing their fuse hands, and you're just telling them you can't fuse. So
Yeah.
it's literally what Starvo does best. Um, and then you basically just regain tempo. Even if you just cast it 3 for 7, your opponent has to respect it. Like they
Hmm.
literally have to respect it. They have to stop what they're doing and make sure they block it out correctly, which means a crown, rampart, and a 2 block. Or if they don't have rampart, then they just have to do a crown and a 3 block. So it does kind of mess up those perfect hands. Turn
Yeah.
off shackles is huge, absolutely huge. The chain match I played, I think I hit him with 2 of these, and he was at like shackle 3 by the time the game was over. Um,
That's
just
brutal.
because like, yeah, you just can't secure tempo. It's like the current meta is like all about tempo, I think. So
Yeah.
even with Prism, ironically, I actually have this in at 1 and into Prism,
Hmm.
because if you can hit them, it's a popper, and if you can hit them and tell them they can't do the stupid make an aura, and then they're 90 million board permanents just swing at you, then it's helpful
Yeah.
for sure, very helpful.
Yeah, yeah, 100% on just all the heroes. Turns out that if you build your deck around your hero text box, it's a very good deck. But then if you don't have access to your hero's text box, it gets a little bit less good, right?
Yeah, I mean with Starvo in particular, because
Yeah,
Starvo's entire game plan is gaining go again, and swinging for big numbers. So the fact
yeah,
that you're able to do that, you're actually saving yourself a lot of life. And on top of that, you're kind of making the next turn really easy to figure out because you know that there's not going to be a fuse. The worst they can do is literally just throw a 3 for 7 at you, or
yeah.
cast a full hand crippling crush. But it's not dominated, so
Hmm.
you just trade tempo back essentially, which isn't that big of a deal because you already shut the turn down. gotten some good damage. So feels good.
Yeah, feels good for sure. So I think that's pretty much the deck. Super good basic fundamentals with a lot of good decision points made. I think adding in some spice with the crush confidence. I think Shock Charmers is like my personal favorite addition on this deck. Didn't see very many people running it, but just the logic behind running that card and how helpful it was. Like you secured a win off of it. You can break creepers with it. It's actually huge. So big props for finding that one, and props on taking the list as far as you did in the Pro Tour. And also, thank you so much for joining me in going over the list.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, is there any shout outs you want to do on the platform? Maybe some homies from Vanguard or local scene?
Shout out to the homie, Jacob from TKF for the quality testing.
Woo.
Haciel and Will, also good testing partners, and all the Hey Wanna Play Prodigy people. Um, just for all the, we love the local scene,
Yeah.
so they've been awesome and also helping me test everything and cheering me on during the event too. So definitely means a lot. Kept my spirits high. So shout out to the homies.
Yeah, for sure. Well, congrats again on your result, and thanks again for coming on. And we'll see you guys next time, and thanks for watching. Make sure to give a like and subscribe and comment and all the cringe YouTube things. And
Cringe.
catch you later.